CAPRICORN!
That's right, everyone. Spoiler season for Strixhaven is officially beginning. We got our first cards today spoiled in the form of 2 Planeswalkers that we'll go over in just a moment. And I'm happy to announce that my hiatus is officially over. I'm back to putting daily videos up, so you can expect a lot more content moving forward. So make sure you like, subscribe, share, all that stupid stuff. Before we jump right into it. Also, we're going to be doing a spoiler live stream on Thursday at noontime, Eastern Standard Time, March 25th, on our Twitch channel. The link is below, so make sure you follow over there and you come join us and we can check out the new cards live as they're spoiled on the stream, and then we can talk about the cards and what we think about them. But with all that aside, let's just jump right into it. So first up is Professor Onyx. Now, Professor Onyx is really interesting. It's a 6-drop, right? And it counts as a legendary planeswalker, Liliana. So this is clearly Liliana Vess. Maybe she's in disguise. I think it's more likely that it's just they're trying to keep her identity secret from the students, but it's not necessarily that she's in disguise in the greater scheme of things. But it is interesting that they chose to go this route with her. 5 starting loyalty. And it has a new keyword ability called Magecraft. Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Now, my initial worry here is what else are we going to see Magecraft on? Because this seems like an insanely powerful ability if it's strictly tied to this drain 2 life sort of effect. Now, if that's the case, and this appears on other permanents especially, but other spells and things, this could get really out of hand. I mean, if you have Professor Onyx in play and you just have a deck full of counter spells and creature removal, like, it's very easy to just win outright just by countering everything they do after you resolve the Professor Onyx. So it's a little worrisome. It leads me to believe that Magecraft is more than likely something that just triggers whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery, and that the effect will actually be different for each card. So you'll have other things that have Magecraft in the set, but it's not always going to be Drain 2, right? That version of Magecraft is specific to Professor Onyx, and other things in the set that have Magecraft are probably going to trigger different variables or different things to happen, not necessarily that Drain 2, because that Drain 2 ability is incredibly powerful right now. We've also got +1 loyalty. You lose 1 life. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. Now this is sort of like a brainstorm, and in some ways it can be better. Like, yes, you lose a life, right? And in some instances, the other 2 cards going to the graveyard are a downside, because you kind of want to stack your deck and know what's coming up. This is why cards like Jace, Mind Sculptor were really, really good in older formats. You could stack the deck to be how you want and then anticipate it and then use that to your advantage with things like counterbalance and stuff like that. So in that way, it's kind of a downside. But if your deck is tailored around specifically utilizing the graveyard, maybe you want the graveyard to be big so that you have things to exile to Kroxa. Maybe you want to look at the top 3 and pick a Kroxa out of that and put it into the graveyard while putting another card in your hand. Like, there's a lot of interesting things you can do with the uptick that, if you build around it properly, can actually make it a better brainstorm. So that's a really, really interesting ability. And then we've got -3. Each opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures that player controls. Now, I like this kind of removal because it's sort of situational, right? But it's also still really powerful. So you can't target specifically what you want to get rid of, which means there's sort of a scalability to this, right? A lot of times you'll be hitting something that's worth a lot that you really want to get rid of, and this ability is insanely powerful. And then other times you might not hit something super powerful with it, so it feels a little underwhelming, but it allows you to sort of work around it and build around it in interesting ways, and I think that makes the card more fun to play. It's also worth noting that the fact that it makes the opponent sacrifice the creature means it will trigger things like Turgid, so that you can gain control of whatever they sacrifice. It can also get around different types of abilities that are going to keep the creature alive, like an indestructible creature that's normally hard to get rid of doesn't survive having to be sacrificed. So things like Toski are fair game. And then you've also got like stuff with hexproof like Dream Trawler, and those types of cards also aren't protected by this, you know, because you're making the opponent have to sacrifice it. They lose the creature even if it has hexproof, which is really cool. And the ultimate ability is actually really crazy too. So it's -8. Each opponent may discard a card. If they don't, they lose 3 life. Repeat this process 6 more times. That's insane. It's essentially they lose 21 life, or they can prevent 3 of that for each card they discard. So if they don't have a hand at all, this can just outright kill them. In combination with things like Vorinclex, this card seems to be absolutely absurd. You can slam an Onyx after a Vorinclex, have the 10 counters, -8, and just kill the opponent outright, making them lose 21 life while you're swinging in with a 6/6 Trampler with haste. Just seems kind of nutty, right? So there's a lot of interesting ways in which I feel like this card can be used. It's worth noting that with the 6 mana cost, I do feel like Wizards is trying to make a statement here where, like, it feels like they're slowing down the format, right? Normally I would expect a planeswalker like this, that's a mythic, that they're going to want to push to sell the set. I'd expect something like this to be like at 5 mana. At 6, this is sort of a signal to me that they're really trying to slow down the environment, maybe give mid-range a chance to sort of catch up with aggro and control and get back in the game. And that's exciting for me because I feel like the current standard meta is really dominated by either aggro on one hand or really ridiculous late game bombs via control decks on the other. So everything that this card is sort of insinuating gives me a lot of hope. And it's really going to matter what the rest of the set looks like to see really how all of these abilities come together and how powerful something like Magecraft is and what Magecraft maybe looks like on other cards. But it's gonna be exciting to see how we can build around that stuff. Now, the other Planeswalker that was spoiled is Casmina, Enigma Sage. Now, this is a Simic Planeswalker. I know, I'm sick of Simic too, but it is pretty interesting. It's a 3-drop, so 1 green, 1 blue, and 1. It has 2 loyalty, Legendary Planeswalker Casmina. Now, the static ability of Casmina is each other Planeswalker you control has the loyalty abilities of Casmina, Enigma Sage. Now, this is pretty interesting. It's sort of like a reverse Nicol Bolas, where instead of with Nicol Bolas, he could get all of the abilities of all your Planeswalkers. Casmina specifically gives her abilities to all your other Planeswalkers, which is really cool. And there's a lot of ways you can utilize this. Her uptick is +2 to scry 1. So this can be used with other Planeswalkers that have a really crazy ultimate ability that cost a lot. And effectively, it allows those Planeswalkers to now double the rate at which they can uptick. Or it can make Planeswalkers like Elspeth or Garruk get an uptick ability when normally they don't have one. It also works really crazy with like the uncommon Planeswalkers for More of the Spark, because now stuff like Narset is able to uptick and put counters back on it so that you can keep using it as the game goes into the late game, whereas before it was like you get 2 uses and you're done. So there's a lot of interesting ways this uptick can be utilized with other Planeswalkers to really help them go over the top. The -X ability is really interesting too. -X, create a 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token. Put X +1/+1 counters on it. Now, this is obviously cool with anything that allows you to buff your team or have creatures come into play bigger than they otherwise would be. Stuff like Anthem effects, etc. Because you can actually theoretically -0 to make a 0/0. And if you have some way of making that creature come into play bigger than it otherwise would be, like an Anthem effect, it'll still come into play as like a 1/1 or 2/2 or whatever it might be based on the sort of buffs that you have out. So that's pretty cool that you can -0, right? The fact that you can give this ability to other planeswalkers means you can make planeswalkers like, you can make Kiora, for example, which was a 3-drop planeswalker in War of the Spark that had 7 loyalty, but all it had was a -1. You can make that card really powerful now, where Kiora comes into play with 7 loyalty and now has this -X. You can make a 6/6 out of it. Kiora's static ability is you get to draw a card whenever you play a creature that has 4 power or more, or rather whenever it comes into play. So if you make a creature that's power 4 or more by minusing for 4 loyalty counters or more, then you're making a big creature and drawing off of Kiora. So I feel like Casmina works really well with stuff like Kiora. Like Huatli is another 3-drop planeswalker from War of the Spark that comes in with 7 loyalty counters. These planeswalkers that are specifically balanced around the idea that they don't have any upticks, or they don't have some really big ability to use their huge starting loyalty for, can really kind of approach the edge of brokenness with something like Casmina. Not to mention, if you have something like Vorinclex in play, not only are all of these loyalty abilities, like the +2 to scry one, gonna double, so now you can +4 to scry one essentially, but when you make a creature with the -X, now that creature is gonna come into play with double the amount of +1/+1 counters on it. So you could -3 and put a 6/6 into play. All of that seems just crazy and busted, but it's the last ability that's really nuts. So -8, search your library for an instant or sorcery card that shares a color with this planeswalker, exile that card, then shuffle. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. So the reason why this is crazy is, first of all, it's interesting because it scales sort of with what planeswalkers you're using. Obviously, the monocolor planeswalkers can't utilize this effect to the same extent as like a multicolor planeswalker will be able to, because the color of the instant or sorcery you can find is tied to the color of the planeswalker that you're using to find it. But the fact that there are these planeswalkers with huge starting loyalty that can downtick this 8 within 1 turn of playing them to activate this ability is insane. The fact that you can grab things like Alrund's Epiphany to take free turns, and just play it for free off the ultimate under the right circumstances is pretty nutty. Also, if you put this into a deck with something like Teferi, the 4-drop Teferi, now all of a sudden it gains all of Casmina's abilities, and it still has its static ability where it can activate loyalty abilities during your opponent's turn, and it can activate them at instant speed. So now all of a sudden you can +2 on your turn to scry, +2 on their turn to scry, +2 on your turn to scry, and you're able to take 2 extra turns like twice as quick as you otherwise would be able to, which is just insane. But not only that, you can use the -8 way quicker with Teferi, since you're upticking on the opponent's turn as well, and you can find, again, like the Alrund's Epiphany or any really big, bomby blue instant or sorcery, and you can do some really crazy things. Teferi in particular is just absolutely insane, and they're both going to be in standard, so I am terrified to see the Simic plus whatever other colors Super Friends deck with Teferi and Casmina and Vorinclex and probably Alrund's Epiphany. It's going to be pretty nutty. Not only that, but the -X is even better with Teferi as well, because you can create a creature at instant speed. So you can wait until your opponent attacks in, and instead of being limited to just, phasing out that creature, which is what Teferi can normally do, now you can make your own creature to block it. And they don't know when they're declaring attacks if you're going to do that or not, and they have to play around the threat of activation, and there's so much value to be had in that. It's just, I really think this card is great. I really think it's going to see a lot of play. It does depend on what the rest of the set looks like, so I'm really excited to see what they show. Spoiler season officially starts this Thursday, March 25th. So we're going to be streaming the spoiler event live on the Capricorn channel on Twitch. So make sure you click the link below and go follow over there and join us at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursday. And we'll check out the spoiler stream, and then we'll talk about the cards afterwards, and we'll see what we think about it. But until next time, always make them spook. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. We are pushing hard for that 1,000 subscriber mark, so please consider subscribing. Hit that button. There's a circle in the middle over there. Hit that. Subscribe. Tell all your friends to do it. Thank you. Also, give this video a like so more people can see it. If you'd like more PlayStation and console game coverage, we've got that down below. And if you'd like more Magic the Gathering coverage, there's more of that somewhere off over that way. Do all the things.